Yeah, so Longchenpa himself, he's living at a time between the time of Sakyapandita and Tsongkhapa, and so he's very much exposed to the different sort of intellectual currents that are alive in Tibet in those times, and also he took advantage of the kind of openness that was a characteristic of Tibetan learning at that time. This was before the harsh sort of sectarian boundaries came into being. So he was free to take teachings from many different teachers. Of course, as you know, in the Nyingma tradition, Longchenpa occupies this position of sort of preeminent authority. So he occupies this position of, he's universally revered and looked up to the extent that very few people have dared to write commentaries on him, apart from himself, and which makes it very difficult for the translator, because his Tibetan is difficult. He doesn't write like other people. But actually, it's been an interesting experience. I've sort of talked to Tibetan Khenpos, for instance, and we ask them, well, how do you feel when you read Longchenpa? And they get this kind of faraway look in their eyes, and they say, nobody writes like Longchenpa. And there are times which makes me think that he was a genuine poet in his own right. He wasn't just a scholar, and he had this kind of sensitivity to language. And quite often, of course, he's talking very often about very sort of subtle points of philosophy, very kind of advanced states of, yogic practice and so on. And on several occasions, one has the impression that what he's saying is not actually in the words on the page. He's sort of using words, but he's sort of, like a poet does, referring to something that is kind of unspeakable. So for a translator, that's very difficult to convey. You can try to express the meaning of what he says, and of course, since he's writing in verse, you can try to produce a sort of verse in English, meter in English. But there's something about Longchenpa that will never be translatable, probably, especially in his verses. Of course, it's easier in the prose, in the commentaries. But there again, he's often talking about very recondite sort of points, and and I think there's still a lot of scholarship to be done about Tibet of his time and about the kind of the intellectual climate that he was working in.